You are listening to the Level Up Gaming Podcast, episode 136, Learning New Systems. In today's episode, we introduce Josh as the new co-host to the podcast. We discuss the topics of learning new systems as he decides on his next game to run. We cover all the details on what makes it challenging to learn new systems and to run new games. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribe and we'll ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome into the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually, I have Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How's life been treating you, Aaron?
Well, life has been filled with a baby right now. That's my entire world is turned upside down. I've been learning a lot of new things with this baby. Trying to keep her happy, kind of keep myself sane. Try to find some moments with my wife. It's tough. It's a big adjustment. I was supposed to game last weekend. That fell through. One of the people got sick. I was supposed to have a couple hours to try and game, which would have been interesting. But it's all sorts of fun things that are going on here. Before I go any further, I was also going to mention earlier that Josh was going to be helping out with the half-hour episodes and the longer episodes from time to time. Josh has been a really good participant with me. I asked him earlier if he wanted to be a co-host on the podcast, and so I think the podcast works better with two people, and I like being able to bounce ideas off of you, and you're a good friend, so Josh is going to be joining me as the new co-host, so welcome to the podcast. Officially, Josh. Yay.
Oh, thank you for having me. No, I'm really enjoying talking to you about these things as well. It's great to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. Absolutely. And your experience is something that I do really look forward to, asking these questions and finding these things out. But you are dealing with a new experience with the baby and all.
I am.
That does seem like a fantastical journey. I went on that journey myself a while ago. My daughter is actually going to be a teenager this year.
Well, you're good for a whole different set of challenges. I already know your kids.
So I've been meaning to ask, is this the first podcast since you've had the baby?
This is the first, longer podcast since I've had the baby. Everything else has been pre-recorded before the baby, and then I did record a 10-minute episode over 10-15 minute episode on a subject over the weekend. So this is my first into the podcasting thing.
Nice. Yeah, it's a heck of an experience, and I'm glad you get to try this out. Have you been reading any interesting books or anything on all sorts
of interesting books. How about yourself, Josh? You been reading anything interesting?
I have. I've been learning new experiences myself, which kind of brings us directly into what we're supposed to be talking about today: learning new systems.
Yeah, learning new systems. You texted me that you are going to be running a cyberpunk game.
Yeah, I was. I'm looking into it. It lands in the cyberpunk universe. I was looking either Cyberpunk or Shadowrun and trying to decide which is going to be the better system. And really what I was thinking about when I was doing that was, what sort of things as a DM do you already have in your tool belt, even when going into a brand new system or a brand new world? And just thinking about you, new experiences yourself, but you've got a lot of experience doing other things. And, the managing a team or dealing as a DM, you've got a lot of experience that you can bring into the world of, taking care of a little one.
You would think that. I'm gonna say that taking care of a baby is significantly more difficult than learning a new role playing system. If you have any kids, if you're listening out there, you would understand that, because it's kind of like when I started consulting, they said the very first day or the very first day on your client, it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. And I didn't get the analogy. Now I do.
Yeah, I remember my kids, it's a lot of, my retail experience came back very heavily with babies because they have no interest in you telling them what should happen. They want things the way that they want things. And good luck.
I'm a very analytical guy, so I'm like looking for the answers, and there just are none. It's just like your baby has the instruction manual, does not want to deliver it to you.
Luckily, game systems do come with instruction manuals.
Yes,
they're
they
just
do.
really big.
Yeah, yeah. So, in the past on the podcast, Jared and I had talked about different systems. Holy moly, that is a thick book.
Yes.
Yeah, Josh is just showing me off the Shadowrun book there over our little meeting here. But one of the things that we tend to stick to our one system, but the one thing that Jared always liked to do was get different books to learn different storytelling mechanics. So like that was his big like shtick in going into the other books. Also finding some other like mechanics to be able to maybe incorporate into the book itself. Like we had taken some things out of Blades in the Dark, like the Just Say Yes sort of stuff. So, learning how you can. So that's one reason why you might want to learn a new system is to be able to incorporate other things. And the other reason why you might want to learn a new system is because that system might fit the theme of your game better. So obviously, you're looking into Cyberpunk and Shadowrun. You must have an idea that this is going to fit the theme of your game better than Dungeons and Dragons. So
Yeah. Well, we've done a couple of, we've been doing fantasy for a couple of years now. And, the high fantasy, magic, swords, dragons, fun stuff. And there's a couple of systems you can run with that. And that's great. And I know Dungeons and Dragons pretty well. I've run it a couple different systems, versions, I guess. Um, and I thought it would be fun to try something a little bit more modern or even postmodern, I guess.
Cyberpunk is kind of
Postmodern?
like a futuristic.
Future, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say postmodern. Postmodern is something completely different. Um, yeah, it's future, and like I enjoy the style, I enjoy the movies, I enjoy the video games that are associated with either Shadowrun or Cyberpunk, and I thought it would be fun to run a game in that. I've got a story. I've got the outline, the NPCs, and some of the sets and stuff like that. And what I was looking at was the various systems and seeing which system would be best for that story. And they are very different, even especially from like Dungeons and Dragons. They're very different because of some very specific things, and I like what they've got. Um, but you have to think, if you're moving from system to system, if you're moving between different ways to tell a story, there are some things that are pretty much standard across the board, and you don't have to worry about like rebuilding your entire repertoire because you're switching systems. There's a couple of things that you can stick with, and they sort of fit. And I started listing these things out so I could plan my story. One of the things we've talked about on this podcast before is the things that the players are looking for. They don't change between systems. Players are there to have a good time. They're there to tell a story. They're there to create a story with you. They have expectations about what sort of game it is, just because you're the DM. If they've played under you before, so there's some of that you don't have to really worry about, and you don't have to relearn. The other thing that I was looking at was tropes. Have you gone on TV tropes or anything like that, Aaron?
No, but there are. It's been brought up on the podcast before. There is a concept in. It's used in Hollywood and any storytelling. There are like 36 essential conflicts that you can write a story about. And those are like the only 36 that exist, basically. So every TV story is built around those conflicts, and so that's kind of where you end up with your tropes, like you get, and then if you go into looking at like what TV series do, a lot of them are syndicated runs of TV. Is you have like 3 episodes that deal with story and like 20 episodes that deal with the flavor of the day, the monster of the day, the problem of the day, what be it, or you have TV series that are very I guess very story driven, where every episode leads into another one. The problem with that though is that the length and the run that you're going to end up with a TV series, it's the problem with American TV in general usually, is that most people shy away from that type of storytelling because you can't get to a syndicated TV show if you go that storytelling, because you have to end up with enough episodes to get to a syndicated TV show. So like if you look at like Breaking Bad, like that would be like the story driven one where everything leads into the next episode, and it's phenomenal TV. It's just like most people like go against it.
Yeah. Well, and what fits better with, the stories that I'd like to tell would be more like X-Files, where, yeah, you've got your monster of the week, but you've got an overarch, a plot that happens between episodes or around episodes.
I think that is generally the best way to do. Like, so one of the ways that I had thought about doing like an Aberrant game, which is a superhero type game, is, villain of the week, monster of the week, where you have a villain everywhere. And then the best thing that you can do is that if you take that formula, like you're going to do a la X-Files, is that in that you are sprinkling in the idea of the bigger story. So I think what is really nice about that, design that you kind of have there is that you are able to give people a lot of crunchiness as you kind of go through each like periodic session. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of like headiness and bigger picture stuff going on if the players are willing to look for it.
Yeah. And you could all the little flavor text and things that they come across, or little sprinklings of items, or the bad guys themselves can be, part of a bigger thing. And yeah, world building in bits and pieces, I think, leads to a more rich experience for the players, because it seems more like an organic experience rather than just like a bunch of flavor text you throw at them and now you're doing the thing.
Yeah, no, I think what you're getting at there is that's the kind of thing that you can bring from system to system. Like that doesn't have to change going into another system. The thing that does change is the setting that the situation happens in. So it won't be my cyberpunk players go into a cave to defeat a dragon. It will be my cyberpunk players go into
net to defeat a dragon.
Yes, something else like that sounds super. Like again, it has to thematically match up with the game itself, but less so with the like the story itself could still be the same story. The interesting thing there is that in learning a new system, typically what you have to learn, and again, the nice thing is that no two systems are wildly different than one another in a lot of ways, or a lot of them kind of fall into like, I guess you could probably columnize like each type of system. The interesting thing that you can do is that you can have the problem with learning a new system and the struggle with learning a new system is that you are going to have to learn the new skills and the new roles and the new mechanics behind how things are done. If once you've learned that, I think the storytelling is sort of secondary. Now you should read the storytelling sections within the book, because you probably want to tell stories that are thematically appropriate for your universe that you're working through.
Yeah. Actually, I took some notes beforehand, just so I stay on track. You are exactly where my next step is right here. Because after you take a look at what you bring to the system, you've got your commonalities with your players, you've got your commonalities with story. You can tell sort of the same fantasy story in a cyberpunk way or in a World of Darkness way, mercenaries, whatever you want to do. You just change the names of things. And that's fine. But each system is unique in that they've got specific stats and skills and how those things interact. Learning that is useful for how you tell your story, because it also tells, it sort of it gives your players agency in your story. They have these things, these tools with which to interact with the environment you've created. And so knowing what those things are gives you the option to build stories that let them explore those new skills. Um, I was looking through, like I said, Shadowpunk and Cyberpunk Red, and one of the fun things I was looking at Cyberpunk Red, they've got like your standard your strength or dex or whatnot, but they call them different things. And the skill that they had under like dexterity was dancing, and I'm thinking, no, you could absolutely use a skill like that to say, there's a hail of bullets and I'm trying to move from place to place. You got a high dance. It looks cool and you don't get shot. Sounds great. And I'm looking through the story and seeing how they set these things up. And knowing that the way that they've set up the stats in the systems lets you sort of incorporate that into the story. And I think that is really important for bringing your players into that world. Sort of, it's not just the same game we were playing before with a new skin. It is a new system. It is a new world. It is a new story. And it's very interesting the way that these different systems set things up, because a lot of things at their core are very similar, but by changing the names of things, by changing how they interact, you get a real different flavor for how things are set.
I think actually one of the things that you brought up there was really interesting, is the concept of like when dexterity is related to dancing, and not just thinking of dancing as like, man, that guy's smooth on the floor. Like, no, it's like you could actually like dance through like a hail of bullets. One of the more interesting, it was a somebody else's like homebrew game, who dropped Johansson. He's got his system called the hybrid game system. And we did the live play with them and the Dungeon Master Dojo, all those people who were part of the live play. But his system there, there's a lot of like weird like knacks and skills that you have, and as long as you can thematically or like explain why this would be appropriate to interact in the situation. So like dance, like I'm going to dance through the hail of bullets. Like you could use that then to roll against it. So you could always use like your best skills as long as you could like describe how your best skills interact. And I think what's interesting about that is that you can then build characters that are very unique without having to be like, well, everybody in this game needs to have these 10 skills. Okay. Cause these are requisite to be able to, just pay to play. And then the rest of these are like, these other 6 skills are your flavor. Like, no, you don't want to just have that. You want to have something where it's more like, well, most people probably have these 5 skills, and then the other, 11 skills are the flavor skills that, make your character unique.
That actually is, I mean, you're bringing this right up, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to move and try something other than Dungeons and Dragons. Every game that I've been running, the core stat that you want to have your perception as high as possible, because it's used like constantly anytime you're trying to do that, or investigation, or deception or persuasion, because those are the only ones you use for huge chunks of the game, any social encounters or solving mysteries, and you're doing those things. And having a new set of stats, having a new way to interact with things and playing it out, I think is going to be a more interesting experience. Knowing the stats as the DM is very important, but you also have to communicate those to your players, so they have to understand how it is. I can say, I can look at dance under dexterity and think dancing through a hail of bullets, but if a player doesn't know that that's an option, they're not going to put any points into these things, and they're going to be like, I'll never use dance. We're not clubbing. What's going on?
No, you really need to express that in like a session 0. You have to have a really concise thing, especially with the new system. I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
don't be afraid to have more than one session zero. Like you might have to have zero and then 0.1, and then we can go into the game, because you might have to sell the game first to your group, and say this is what can be done, and then there's probably going to be a lengthier character creation process that's involved in a new game. At least I know for me, like I'm terribly slow at making characters. So if you hand me a brand new book where I got to figure things out, I'm going to look through a lot of that book and try and figure it all out.
Yeah. Actually, on that subject, I don't want to give too much away on the podcast in case my players are listening, but there is a session zero that we had talked about before, that involves giving the players pre-gen characters for the session zero that I
Oh,
was definitely planning on using for this.
are you planning on doing something that's maybe been discussed in the podcast, or
Perhaps. I won't go too far into it.
I think I have an inkling on what you might be thinking about. It was a good idea back then. So hey, if you are part of Josh's group, go back and listen to
No,
last 100. Go back and listen to the last 100 episodes to figure out what.
It is definitely in the last 100 episodes. There will be clues. So, but I think that, yes, you do need to have a lengthier session zero or even multiple session zeros to teach a new system, and having some sort of primer on character creation is extremely useful. If you do like a one-off sort of style, here are some pre-gen characters, write them like you stole them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you said when you give pre-gen characters out to people. They have no qualms about these things dying because they don't have a stake in them. But it's a great way to learn the system.
And the technique that I think you are going to apply to it is actually a really good way to learn the system. In terms of utilizing 2 session zeros potentially, that's going to be the best way to do it.
Yeah. And then because you've got the stats, because you've got this new system, you have to pay attention to how you're building these things. And there's a couple of different ways you can do challenges. Make a challenge that people are going to enjoy. And it's the same with any system. You just have to use the new stats. You have to use the new system and how it's supposed to be designed. Anytime you're looking at one of these new books, one of these new systems, try and find if there is like a pre-made story. Like, you can get them off of a bunch of different sites. They've got like a 5th level or like a 7th level, like pre-built, and just go through and see how they design these things. You don't have to use them. You don't have to use the way somebody else writes it, because that's not your story. That's somebody else's story. But you can see how they put the system to use to tell their story and pull it apart.
It's the reason why people use modules, is to be able to learn the system, be able to learn how things work. So yeah, being able to see how somebody else did it or what they would have you do makes a lot of sense.
Which brings me to the last point, and the reason why I'm sort of hung up between these two systems, between Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, is that the last bit that's important for telling a story, for creating this world, is the parts of the storytelling system that are unique to that world. And it doesn't show up in the stats. It doesn't show up in the way that you roll dice or the way that you interact. There's a couple of things that happen. It's style, it's history, and especially with these systems, it's slang. And I think these are really cool and interesting parts of telling a story in a unique system, in a system that is different from other systems. In both these, you've got, when you talk about cyberpunk, when you talk about the cyberpunk aesthetic, your Blade Runners, your Neuromancers, your so that's all I can think of at the top of my head. Like Gattaca and stuff like that. You've got a very uh, neo-futuristic, washed out in neon, rainy streets, all of the various signage that's constantly assaulting
It's
you.
kind of like your dystopian future,
Mhm.
look.
Yeah, snow crash constantly, and the style that people wear. You've got the really weird clothes and the crazy hair and the cybernetic parts and the trench coats, and everybody's carrying around guns. Whatever it is, whatever makes that world seem real, you have to have that in your story to sort of build the ambiance, so your players are in it. And if you're doing that, any of these systems come with history. They've got a world that they exist in. You're not coming in with a brand new world. These systems have some sort of history. Now, you can go and say, my world is separate from the official world, but then you're kind of doing your own thing, and that sort of
I would caution. I even said this when you're learning just how to role play. I'd caution against going and homebrewing and world building your own world. Like you're better off using the existing world and the existing history, so you are able to better present a good game to your
mhm.
players. And you don't want to go too far off the rails here because you don't have the mastery. You're a novice in the system itself, and do it for 100 hours. Maybe you can start tweaking things. Do it for 1,000 hours, then you can start building your own cyberpunk world.
Absolutely. If you've got the history, if you've been doing it for a long time, by all means, build the world from the ground up. But if it's a new system, if you're learning a new way to tell a story, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Use what's there because it helps. And that works with style, that works with history. And really importantly, I like with both Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, one of the fun things that I got into was the various slang that's involved. They've got very specific words that are used within the stories that mean things to the players, to the world itself. And having that as part of your story, have your NPCs interact in a way that seems natural for the environment, makes them more grounded characters, makes your story seem more realistic for the story that you're telling, for the world that you're inhabiting. And I think that's going to draw your players in better. That's going to make it a more enjoyable experience because it is not just a reflavored Dungeons and Dragons. It is not just another World of Darkness with a coat of paint over the top of it. It is, these are new players, these are new people, these are new situations, and it is a foreign world that they're now inhabiting. And they will need to pick up some of these same sort of slang terms in order to work in that world. And if you're really lucky, your players will start using the slang terms in their interactions, and then you're golden. So
That's how you know that they've grabbed onto the game.
yeah,
You know what you're doing is working if you do that. But yeah, no, that's I mean, just like you said, just you have to get your players into there. You don't want to reskin everything that you just did in Dungeons and Dragons. You want to do something that's unique to that world. You want to immerse your players in it. I don't think I could have said it any better. So, because you already said it better. So, anyways, you have anything else you want to add to this episode, Josh?
well, I was thinking like unique things in slang. The baby have any slang yet?
No, I got ooh sometimes.
Pointing, screaming, yeah.
Screaming. I know when she wants food. Oh, I know that good.
Hey, you have to incorporate this slang to make an organic world.
But No, I'm really excited to have you as the co-host, Josh. And again, if you guys have tried new systems or if you guys have learned new systems, maybe the challenges that have gone through that, level up your gaming podcast at gmail.com or facebook.com/level up your gaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube. I have not updated it in several days. I will make sure to get that updated because I'm probably 2 episodes behind on it, but I promise it'll be there. And then you can smash that like button on that episode. Otherwise, go ahead and review the podcast, subscribe, recommend it to a friend, all that good stuff. So for Josh, the new co-host, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.